What happens when a live morning show, a Hollywood icon, and a single unexpected question collide in a way no one, not even the cameras, is prepared for? Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, smash the like button, and drop a comment below to tell us what you think as this unfolds. What you're about to hear is a dramatic, cinematic retelling of a moment that shook the studio to its core. Chris Hemsworth had walked onto countless sets before, but something felt different about this one. Maybe it was the bright, sterile glare of the View's stage lights, or the faint tension humming beneath the applause as the audience welcomed him. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the way Joy Behar watched him with that careful mix of curiosity and mischief, like a cat preparing to bat the first domino. Whatever it was, Hemsworth sensed it the moment he sat down. His smile was warm, practiced, steady, but his eyes flicked across the room as if he were scanning for a threat only he could feel. And the cameras loved it. The View's table, curved like a half-moon around its guests, seemed to draw him in and trap him inside its orbit. Joy leaned forward first, elbows resting lightly on the desk, that familiar grin tugging at her lips as the crowd finally settled. "Chris, welcome back," she said, her voice soft, almost deceptively casual. "You know, every time you're here, something interesting happens." He laughed, a deep, natural sound that made half the studio audience melt instantly. "I'll take that as a compliment." But even as he said it, there was a tiny shift, barely perceptible, but real. His posture stiffened. His fingers drummed once against the table's polished surface. He had handled harder interviews than this. Journalists with sharper angles. Hosts with bigger teeth. But Joy Behar was unpredictable in a way that never fully relaxed anyone. The other co-hosts chimed in with their greetings, but the air never fully lost that faint crackle. Chris answered questions about his latest film with practiced ease, weaving behind-the-scenes anecdotes with flashes of humor that made the front row giggle. The cameras panned, audience clapped, producers nodded approvingly. Everything was fine, until Joy decided it wasn't. It happened between questions, one of those soft transitions where hosts usually reset, sip water, shuffle cards. But Joy didn't shuffle anything. She kept her eyes locked on Chris, waiting for her opening like a hunter watching brush rustle. "So, Chris," she said lightly, "there's a rumor circulating." The way she dragged that word out sent a ripple through the room. "That you've been, how should I say this, difficult, on certain sets lately." The silence that followed felt like someone had sucked the air out of the studio. The audience didn't clap, didn't laugh, didn't shift in their seats. They froze. Chris's smile faltered, just barely. But in Hollywood, the difference between barely and completely was everything. His eyes flicked sideways. Not toward the co-hosts, not toward the audience, toward the producers just off stage. The ones who had sworn this segment would be routine, promotional, gentle. He took a breath that sounded steady to anyone who didn't know him, but he knew it wasn't. "Well," he said, choosing his words carefully, "I wouldn't say." Joy cut in, because the reports weren't flattering. That did it. Something in the crowd shifted, like they collectively exhaled but didn't mean to. A few people murmured. A few held their phones tighter. Chris straightened, shoulders squared, as if preparing for impact. "Look," he said, voice lower now, the warmth replaced with something firmer. "I think it's important to clarify things before they get blown out of proportion." Joy didn't blink. "So you're saying they're wrong?" His jaw tightened slightly, but the cameras caught it. "I'm saying," he replied slowly, "that rumors are often exaggerated." There it was, the safe answer. The diplomatic path. The one every PR advisor in Los Angeles prayed their clients would stick to. But Joy wasn't having it. "Exaggerated," she repeated, rolling the word around like a stone she wasn't sure she liked. "Or true enough to make people talk?" A few audience members gasped. One whispered, "Oh my God." Another muttered something that sounded suspiciously like, "She's pushing him." Chris leaned back, not a retreat but a recalibration. His hands clasped on the table, knuckles whitening for a fraction of a second before he forced them to relax. "Joy," he said with a measured calm, "I came here to talk about the movie. I'm happy to address things, but I'm not here to entertain gossip. It should have ended there. It didn't." "Well," she said, raising her eyebrows, "when your name's in the headlines, people expect honesty." Chris inhaled sharply. Not offended. Not startled. Something else. Something visceral, like a protective instinct awakening. The same energy he brought to roles where storms rumbled behind his eyes just before lightning struck. "You think I'm not being honest?" he asked quietly. The room pulsed with tension. Joy opened her mouth. But before she could answer, one of the co-hosts tried to intervene, laugh spilling out awkwardly. Okay, let's not turn this into. But Chris wasn't listening to her. He was watching Joy. Eyes sharp, controlled, focused. When you imply that, he continued, voice smooth but edged, you're not asking a question anymore. You're making an accusation. Someone in the audience applauded nervously. One single clap before they realized the moment wasn't applause-worthy, then stopped abruptly. The hosts shifted uncomfortably. Joy didn't budge. I'm just giving you the chance to clear things up, she replied. By repeating rumors, he countered. A spark. Quick. Electric. By confronting them, she said. The audience murmured again, quieter this time, as if afraid to break whatever thin line they were watching unfold. Chris leaned in just slightly, forehead creasing, not in anger, not yet, but in disbelief. You invited me here, he said slowly. You told my team we'd be discussing the film. And now you want to ambush me with tabloid noise. The irritation slipped in, subtle but undeniable. If that's the way you want to run this interview, then let's call it what it is. Joy lifted her chin. And what do you think it is? Chris didn't blink. A setup. That word echoed through the studio like metal dropped onto concrete. The co-hosts froze. A producer stepped forward slightly off camera, as if ready to intervene. The audience tensed so hard you could feel the air quiver. Joy's face didn't change at first, but something in her eyes flashed. Not anger. Surprise. Just a flicker. Chris, she said with a controlled steadiness, no one here is trying to trap you. Then why bring it up? He shot back. Because people want answers. People want entertainment. She hesitated, just for a heartbeat. But he saw it, and that was when everything inside him shifted. His voice no longer held the polite restraint of a diplomatic guest. It carried weight. Frustration. A rawness he usually kept buried beneath charm. You know what's funny? He said, leaning closer. Every time I show up, you ask about my career, my family, my personal life, fine. That's part of the game. I get it. But today you didn't come with curiosity. You came with an angle. The studio's air conditioner hummed in the silence. Joy's lips parted, but Chris continued, his tone steady but intense. I spend months away from my family working on sets. Long days. Hard days. I give everything to what I do. And when someone decides to twist that into a narrative that I'm difficult or hard to work with, it affects real people. Not just me. Crews. Directors. My kids, when they're old enough to read this stuff. The audience softened. A few nodded. A few murmured gentle ahs. Joy didn't respond immediately. She studied him. There was no smugness now. No smirk. Just silence, and something like conflict behind her gaze. Chris, she said finally, I wasn't trying to attack you. He exhaled, not relief, not anger, something in between. I'm not here to fight with you, he said quietly. But I won't sit here and pretend rumors are facts just because they make good TV. A palpable shift rippled through the room. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, focusing tighter on his expression. Firm, frustrated, real. Joy opened her mouth to speak again, but this time her words came slower, more measured. Then tell us what is true. Chris didn't answer immediately. He looked down at the table for a moment, as if weighing something heavy, something he hadn't planned to share. When he lifted his head again, the air around him felt different, charged. Truth, he said. Fine. You want truth? I'll give it. A producer suddenly waved from offstage, signaling a commercial break. The red light above the camera blinked, and the show's iconic music swelled through the studio. But Chris didn't look away from Joy. And Joy didn't look away from him. As the lights dimmed for the break, the audience sat frozen, silent, staring at the two of them like they had just witnessed the opening spark of something explosive. Somewhere in the shadows behind the cameras, someone whispered, "Oh, this is going to blow up." And they were right. The studio's theme music faded, but the tension didn't. It clung to the room like a thick fog, visible, heavy, impossible to ignore. The moment the cameras stopped rolling, the illusion of control dissolved. Stagehands hurried across the floor, adjusting mics, refreshing water, whispering frantically into earpieces as if trying to contain something volatile before it erupted. But there was no containing this. Chris remained in his seat, jaw set, eyes smoldering with something more complex than simple irritation. Emotional gravity pulled everything toward him. Even the audience, who had been told they could chat quietly during the break, sat like statues. Phones hovered in hands, but no one dared lift them. Not yet. Not when the slightest sound might trigger the collision they all sensed approaching. Joy Behar stayed still as well, but not frozen. She watched him with the sharpness of a veteran host who had weathered storms far bigger than celebrity discomfort. And yet, this wasn't discomfort. This was something weightier. A shift in tone she hadn't fully predicted. Her fingers tapped once on the table. Nerves she tried to hide or strategy she was sharpening, no one could tell. Finally, she broke the silence. "Chris," she said quietly, softer than before, "you know this is what we do. It's what the audience expects." He turned toward her slowly. His expression wasn't angry. It was controlled. So controlled that the restraint itself made the air tremble. "I get asking tough questions," he said, voice low. "But what you did wasn't a question. It was bait." Joy didn't look away. "I was giving you the opportunity to address something people are talking about. You know better than anyone," he replied, "that half the things people talk about don't deserve oxygen." For a moment, Joy seemed to consider that. Then she leaned forward, folding her hands. "Chris, if you felt blindsided, that wasn't the intention." He held her gaze unblinking. Intention doesn't erase impact. That landed harder than anything he'd said on air. The co-hosts exchanged looks, unsure if they should intervene or stay silent. One of them mouthed, "Are we okay?" to a producer. The producer shrugged helplessly. Then a voice boomed across the stage. "Back in 30 seconds. Everyone snapped into forced composure. Chris inhaled, lifting his shoulders slowly. He could have walked off. He could have demanded the segment be cut. He could have refused to continue. But instead he sat up straighter, eyes forward, preparing to step back into the ring. Joy did the same, though for the first time, her confidence wavered at the edges. The red camera light blinked on. The music faded. "We're back," the moderator said brightly, far too brightly, with Chris Hemsworth, who's here promoting his new film. Applause. Nervous, uneven. Paid clapping that couldn't hide the unspoken tension. Chris smiled politely, but his eyes were nowhere near amused. Joy cleared her throat. Before the break, Chris was about to tell us the truth behind some rumors circulating on set. The crowd leaned forward collectively. Even the cameraman shifted, sensing the gravity of the moment. Chris looked at Joy for a long moment. The kind of moment that normally gets edited out. But this was live TV. Raw. Unfiltered. "Right," he said finally. "The truth." A hush swept the studio, blanketing every face. "The truth is," his voice was calm. Too calm. "I've had a tough year." Joy blinked at that, surprised. "I've been filming back to back," he continued, "barely seeing my family. 12, sometimes 14-hour days. Stunts that push the limits. Physically and mentally exhausting work. And sometimes that pressure slips through." The audience listened, captivated. "I'm not perfect," he said. "I get tired. I get stressed. I can snap. Anyone would." Joy spoke carefully. "So you're saying there's some truth to the rumors?" He didn't hesitate. "I'm saying I'm human." A soft murmur spread across the crowd, a sympathetic one. Joy paused, recalculating. "But some reports claimed you walked off set. That you yelled at crew members." Chris's eyes sharpened. "And did you read the follow-up? The corrections? The parts where the people who were actually there said it never happened." She didn't answer. He continued, leaning slightly forward. "Joy, you know how this works. One person posts something online, and suddenly it's everywhere. Doesn't matter if it's real or not. Doesn't matter if it hurts people." Somewhere in the audience, a woman nodded emphatically. Another whispered, "He's right." Joy interlocked her fingers. "But the perception." "Forget perception," he cut in gently. "Let's talk about reality." He paused, letting the silence mature into something tense, something dense. "Reality is, I've never disrespected a crew member in my life. I've never stormed off a set. If anything, I'm usually the last one there. Ask anyone who's actually worked with me." Joy swallowed, barely noticeable, but there. "And," Chris continued, "if you wanted to ask me about stress, about pressure, about how the industry chews up actors and spits them out with a smile, fine, we can have that conversation." He tilted his head. "But you didn't ask that." Joy exhaled slowly. "Okay, then let me ask now." The audience held its breath. "Are you okay, Chris?" Really, there it was. The real question. Unexpected. Vulnerable. And it hit him harder than any accusation. His expression softened, just a fraction. With the same honesty that had electrified the studio moments earlier, he answered quietly. I'm doing my best. The room, once electric with tension, glowed now with empathy. But it didn't last. Because Joy, perhaps emboldened by the emotion now simmering between them, pushed again. But do you think, she said slowly, that you might be taking on too much? That maybe the pressure is affecting your behavior? His entire demeanor shifted, subtly but unmistakably. The co-hosts sensed it immediately, exchanging glances that screamed, please stop. Chris leaned back. Are you suggesting I'm unstable? No, Joy replied quickly. I'm asking if the workload is affecting how people perceive you. He didn't blink. Sounds like the same thing. It's not. It feels like it. Joy hesitated, then said, I'm just trying to understand why these stories exist. A flash, just a flash, crossed his expression. Irritation. Hurt. Something deeper. Maybe, he said slowly, because drama sells. Joy opened her mouth. And maybe, he continued, because people love tearing celebrities down. Especially ones who try to keep their lives private. The crowd murmured. Joy pressed on. So you think you're being targeted? Don't twist my words. I'm asking. You're framing, he snapped, not loudly, but sharply enough that the audience jolted. Joy's eyebrows rose. Framing? You're not asking to understand. You're asking to provoke. Gasps rippled across the room. One co-host whispered, Oh boy. Joy's voice lowered, dangerously calm. Chris, you're coming off a little defensive. The audience tensed again. Several shook their heads. A few whispered, she shouldn't have said that. Chris's eyes darkened. If someone keeps pushing the same loaded question in different shapes, anybody would get defensive. Joy held her ground. I'm doing my job. And I'm doing mine, he said, voice firm. Which right now is telling you to stop reducing my life to headlines. The moderator jumped in, desperate. Okay, let's shift topics. But Joy wasn't done. Chris, no one here is trying to tear you down. Then why bring up rumors you know are false? He asked, voice low and steady. Silence. Joy hesitated. It wasn't a long hesitation, but it was long enough. Long enough for the audience to notice. Long enough for Chris to see through it. You didn't bring them up because they're relevant, he said softly. You brought them up because they'd make good television. That line hit the studio like a physical blow. Joy froze. The audience's reaction was immediate. Half gasped, half murmured. One guy in the back whispered, Holy. Even the co-hosts stopped pretending to smile. Joy inhaled. That's not fair. Neither was your question, Chris countered. A shaky stillness settled over the table. Then Joy said something no one expected. Something she probably shouldn't have said on live television. Maybe, she said slowly, you're reacting this strongly because there's something you don't want people to know. The audience exploded, shocked cries, whispers, disbelief. The moderator slammed her palm on the table. Joy! Chris stiffened. The hurt behind his eyes flared into something sharper. Anger, yes, but controlled. Contained. Dangerous in its quietness. Careful, he said softly. Joy's lips parted, but no words came out. Because Chris leaned in, voice low, steady, almost whisper-soft, and yet carrying more weight than anything he'd said all morning. You think I'm hiding something? He asked. Then ask me directly. The room held its breath. But Joy didn't. Couldn't. For the first time since the confrontation began, she broke eye contact. That was all it took. Chris exhaled slowly, turning his gaze toward the audience, who watched him with a mix of awe and disbelief. He wasn't done. But he wasn't finished yet either. Because the moment Joy looked away, the power shifted. Completely. The shift in power was subtle at first, like a faint tremor under the floorboards, but everyone in the studio felt it. The moment Joy looked away, even for that single heartbeat, the balance between them tilted sharply. The audience sensed it. The co-hosts sensed it. And Joy herself. She felt it most of all. Chris inhaled deeply, steadying himself, as if preparing to step into a moment that demanded more than charm or composure. Something inside him had awakened, calm, fierce, and utterly unshakable. The moderator tried again, almost pleading. Maybe we should. But neither Chris nor Joy was listening. Joy lifted her gaze back to him. But the confidence she normally wore like armor had cracks now. She pressed her palms on the table, leaning forward with a quiet resolve, as if reclaiming territory. Fine, she said softly. If you want the question directly, are you hiding something? The air thickened instantly. Every camera operator leaned in. A producer mouthed no from the shadows. Several audience members slapped hands over their mouths. Chris didn't flinch. He lifted his chin slightly. His voice dropped into something steady, resonant. I'm not hiding anything. I'm protecting myself from bad faith questions. Joy blinked. Bad faith? Yes, he said. When the goal isn't to understand, but to corner. A wave of murmurs rose from the seats. The co-host next to Joy bit her lip, whispering, This feels dangerous. But Joy, cornered or not, wasn't backing down. Her career had been built on pushing through uncomfortable conversations. And this was one of the most charged in years. She straightened, eyes narrowing. Not in malice, but in determination. Chris, I'm not your enemy. He looked at her for a long, waited moment. Then stopped talking like one. Gasps echoed across the studio. Someone whispered, Oh, that's it. It's on. Joy's breath caught, just a slight hitch, but enough that Chris noticed. Enough that the audience noticed too. You think I'm attacking you? She asked, voice tight. I think, he said, you're more interested in stirring controversy than understanding why this bothers me. Joy bristled, but before she could respond, Chris continued, calmly, deliberately, each word landing with precision. I've been in this industry for nearly 2 decades. I've seen stories spun out of nothing. I've watched friends and colleagues get destroyed because someone wanted a headline. He paused. I won't let that happen to me. Joy's expression softened, just a fraction, but she masked it quickly. I'm not trying to destroy you. I know, he replied, but you're playing with something you don't fully understand. The room went still. Even the cameras seemed quieter. What don't I understand? Joy asked slowly. Chris leaned forward. What it's like to have your life dissected by millions of strangers. To worry about how every sentence you say will be twisted into something toxic. To be judged not for who you are, but for who people think you are. Joy looked at him, suddenly less confrontational. Chris, I'm not angry with you, he said, voice low but powerful. I'm tired. That one word hit the audience like a punch. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't defensive. It was human. The co-host to Joy's left whispered, Wow, under her breath. Joy glanced down at her cards, as if searching for a lifeline. But the printed questions looked useless now, small, flimsy, irrelevant. She set them aside. Okay, she said gently. Then let's start again. But Chris shook his head softly. We can't pretend those questions didn't happen. Joy swallowed hard. You're right. Silence. Heavy. Raw. Unscripted. Then Chris continued, quiet, but with an intensity that wrapped around the entire studio. You didn't ask me if I'm stressed. You didn't ask if something's going on. You didn't ask how I'm managing. You asked if I was being difficult. His voice hardened slightly. That's not concern. That's judgment disguised as curiosity. Joy's shoulders stiffened. I wasn't judging you. You implied it, he said. She met his eyes again. This time, not to challenge, but to hold something fragile between them. Then tell me what you wish I'd asked. The audience collectively leaned forward, sensing the moment shifting from confrontation into something deeper, more revealing. Chris exhaled slowly. I wish you'd asked why I looked tired today, he said. Or why I hesitated before answering. Or why someone who's usually cheerful and easygoing seems different. Joy blinked. Okay, why? He hesitated, not dramatically, not for effect. This was real hesitation. Real emotion. Because my daughter was sick last night, he said. I barely slept. A ripple of sympathy swept across the audience. And before that, he continued, I spent 6 months filming nonstop. I've been juggling press tours with personal responsibilities. And I'm exhausted. Joy's features softened completely, her earlier sharpness dissolving. Chris, I didn't know. You didn't ask, he said softly. The moderator placed a hand over her heart. A few audience members sighed audibly. One whispered, That's heartbreaking. Joy leaned closer, voice warm now. Chris, I'm sorry. But Chris wasn't looking for an apology. He shook his head. I don't want sympathy. I want fairness. Joy nodded slowly. Fair. A delicate pause stretched between them. It could have ended peacefully. But then, just as the emotional tide began to settle, another co-host jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. Well, I think we can all agree Chris isn't difficult, she said with a big smile. He's just passionate. The intention was good. The execution terrible. The audience laughed awkwardly. Joy smiled weakly. But Chris? He didn't find it funny. His jaw tightened again. Only for a moment. But everyone felt it. I'm passionate, he said carefully, about truth. Something darker flickered in his tone. something unresolved beneath the apology and vulnerability. Joy noticed. "Chris, are we okay?" He thought about it, really thought about it, before answering. "I don't like being misrepresented," he said. And today felt like a misrepresentation. Joy nodded slowly, as if absorbing a blow she didn't see coming. "Can I ask," she said softly, "why this hit you so hard?" Chris hesitated, weighing whether to reveal the truth. Then he sighed. "Because last year," he said quietly, "I had people in my life, friends, who believed lies about me before asking me what was real. And it cost relationships." The crowd fell completely silent. Joy's expression changed, something between compassion and regret. "Chris, so when you repeat a rumor," he continued, "you're not just threatening my reputation. You're threatening everything I've built, everything I'm trying to protect." Joy finally leaned back, absorbing the weight of his words. "I didn't want to hurt you." He nodded gently. "I know." A beat passed. And then, unexpectedly, Chris cracked a faint, tired smile. "But you did." Joy let out a breath that trembled slightly. "I'm honestly sorry." The audience watched, utterly absorbed. Captivated. Moved. Chris nodded. "Thank you." For a moment, it felt like the tension had truly lifted. Until a voice from the audience, too loud, too bold, shouted. Joy was right to ask. Everyone snapped their heads toward the outburst. Security moved instantly, but the ripple had already spread. Chris turned sharply, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in disbelief. Joy looked mortified. The audience member shouted again. "We deserve to know the truth." Producers panicked. Cameras shifted. Chris's composure cracked, just slightly, but unmistakably. "That," he said, pointing calmly toward the heckler, "is exactly what I'm talking about." The room simmered with rising tension, because the show wasn't over, and the confrontation was far from finished. The studio had never felt so unstable, like the entire room was tilting toward something none of them could stop. The heckler's voice still echoed faintly in the rafters, even as security guided him toward the exit. His outburst wasn't long, but it was loud enough, sharp enough, to rip open the fragile piece Chris and Joy had begun stitching together. Chris watched him go, jaw tight, breathing steady but heavier than before. It wasn't the interruption itself that rattled him. It was the validation of his biggest fear. That no matter what he said, no matter how honest he tried to be, someone would still want the worst version of him. Joy followed his gaze to the audience member being escorted out. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice low and shaken. "He shouldn't have said that." Chris shifted his attention back to her. "It's fine." "It isn't," she insisted softly. Chris didn't argue. He only leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair in a rare, unguarded gesture that made the audience fall silent all over again. He wasn't an actor on a talk show anymore. He wasn't Thor. He wasn't a celebrity delivering media-friendly answers. He was a man, exhausted, misunderstood, stretched too thin. The moderator cleared her throat, her voice trembling with forced brightness. Let's bring things back. We still have a little time left." No one believed for a second that things could go back, but the camera light flashed red again, reminding everyone they were not just in a tense room. They were in a tense room being broadcast to millions. Joy took a careful breath. "Chris, I want to ask you something real, and I want to ask it the right way." Chris met her eyes, guarded but listening. She continued, "What's the one thing you want people to understand about you right now? Not as an actor, not as a tabloid headline, just as a person." The question landed gently yet deeply. Even the audience felt it settle like dust in a beam of light. Chris looked down for a long moment, absorbing the simplicity, maybe the kindness, of the question. When he lifted his head, something in his expression had changed. Softer. Clearer. "I want people to understand," he said quietly, "that I'm trying." Joy nodded, her gaze steady. "Trying in what way?" "In every way," he replied. "To be a good father. To be a good partner. To be a good coworker. To be someone who doesn't let stress turn into something destructive." His voice trembled, barely, but enough. "To be someone who lives up to the expectations everyone has of me, even when those expectations are impossible." The room was silent. He continued, "I want people to know I'm not a headline. I'm not a rumor. I'm not whatever someone online decides I am on a given day. I'm human." His voice lowered further. "And I'm allowed to feel overwhelmed." Joy blinked, and for the first time in years on live television, she didn't have an immediate response. The audience, however, did. A wave of soft, supportive applause rose, gentle, respectful, understanding. No forced clapping. No stage cue. Just real people reacting to real vulnerability. But before Chris could relax into the moment, another co-host, who had been silent too long, too tense, leaned forward with something she likely meant as empathy, but landed like a strike. "Chris, no one is saying you're not human," she said gently. "But you have to understand, when you react strongly like this, it feeds the negativity. It makes people think the rumors might have merit." The air snapped back into tension. Joy's eyes flashed with frustration at her colleague. Not now. But Chris had already turned toward the co-host, his expression clearing like a sky right before thunder. "How am I supposed to react?" he asked quietly. "When someone questions my integrity on live television?" The co-host swallowed. "I just meant." "No," he said, voice low but unshakably controlled. "Don't soften it. Say what you meant." She faltered. "I meant strong reactions can be misinterpreted." Chris leaned closer. "And what about strong accusations? How should those be interpreted?" The audience murmured in agreement. Joy placed a steadying hand on the table. But Chris wasn't done. "You expect me to sit here smiling while someone throws a rumor at me like it's fact?" he asked, staring directly at the co-host. "Is that what you want? A puppet? A PR version of me? Of course not. Then don't criticize me for being honest." The co-host shrank back, chastened. The audience applauded, this time louder, more confidently. They were no longer watching an interview. They were watching a man reclaim something, his voice, his dignity, his narrative. Joy exhaled slowly. "Chris, thank you for being honest today. Truly." He nodded, calmer now. "I didn't come here to fight." "I know. I just wanted to talk about the movie." A ripple of sympathetic laughter moved through the crowd. Joy smiled, genuinely this time. "And we will. But before we do, I need to say something." The studio shifted. Even Chris turned fully toward her. Joy took a breath. "You're right. I handled that wrong. I shouldn't have brought up those rumors the way I did. It wasn't fair." She paused. "And I'm sorry." The apology was quiet but sincere. And it hit harder than any accusation had. Chris didn't speak immediately. His expression softened, but not with triumph. With relief. "Thank you," he said simply. The moderator clasped her hands together. "Well, I think we've all learned something today." But the moment wasn't done. Because the audience suddenly erupted into spontaneous applause, standing applause. Even the producers looked stunned. The energy wasn't for Joy. Or the show. It was for Chris, for his vulnerability, his composure, his refusal to let his story be twisted. He turned toward the crowd, a small, grateful smile forming. "Thank you." Joy wiped the corner of her eye discreetly. "Chris, before we wrap, is there anything else you want to say?" He thought for a moment, really thought, and then nodded. "Yes." Everyone leaned in. "If you see something online about me, or anyone, remember there's a real person behind those headlines. Someone with a family. Someone with struggles you'll never see. Just don't be so quick to believe the worst." The crowd cheered again. Joy placed a hand over her heart. "Well said." "And," Chris added, turning slightly to the camera, "be kind. It makes a difference." The screen froze him in a close-up, eyes exhausted but resolute, face drained but honest. "That's not weakness," he finished. "That's strength." The applause roared like a wave crashing. The moderator signaled the final seconds of airtime. "Chris Hemsworth, everyone. Thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and for joining us today." The music swelled. The cameras cut. The red studio light clicked off. But the moment wasn't over. Because the real fallout was just beginning. By the time Chris stepped backstage, his phone was vibrating nonstop. Social media was already exploding. Clips circulating, headlines forming, fans defending, critics analyzing. The confrontation had ignited the internet like wildfire. Tweets, edits, hashtags, think pieces brewing. Some called him brave. Some called him emotional. Some said Joy crossed the line. Others said Chris overreacted. No one could agree on what the moment meant. But they absolutely agreed on one thing. It was unforgettable. Joy approached him backstage, hesitant but earnest. "Chris, I really am sorry." He nodded softly. "We're good." She extended her hand. He shook it, but the cameras backstage caught the handshake, and the footage would later go viral too. Outside, fans had already gathered, chanting his name. And across the world, millions were talking about what happened on The View that morning. Some praised Joy for asking tough questions. Others slammed her for blindsiding him. Talk shows debated it. The late-night hosts joked about it. News outlets analyzed every expression, every pause, every word. But everyone agreed on one thing. This wasn't just an interview. It was a moment. Raw, explosive, human. And it changed the conversation about Chris Hemsworth in ways he never expected. And now it's your turn. What do you think really happened on that stage? Was Joy right to press him? Was Chris justified in pushing back? Who crossed the line? Or did they both? Drop your thoughts, theories, and takes in the comments below. And if you want more dramatic, cinematic, explosive celebrity moments told like this, make sure you subscribe to Stage View and hit that bell so you never miss the next story. This is Stage View, where the drama never stays behind the scenes.